Hey everybody, welcome back to the K2N Online Paddle School. We are back here on YouTube, and this week we have another episode of the K2N blog. In 2 weeks, we are hosting an event here on Lake Hernando called the Blueberry Slide. The footage at the end of the video here is going to be going over scoping out the course. If you just want to check out that course because you are coming to attend, or if you just want to see what the backwaters of Lake Hernando look like, that timestamp is right here. You can jump ahead and see where we mark the course and see all of that. So with hosting events and some of the things going on within the paddling world, I wanted to give some commentary on governing bodies for international or world championship level events. I am on the other side of the spectrum when it comes to race organization. Through the Florida Competition Paddle Association, we host 3 events here in Florida each year. I do not make a singular penny on them. There is no entry fee. You show up, line up, we blow the horn, we're gonna time you, you can draft whatever's around you. It is very low key. The fun part about it though is the level of skill can be very high at some of these races. And so you have an outlet to easily go within your region and find somebody that answers the call of your skill level. I know a lot of paddlers feel like they have to go to a very high or prestigious event in order to find competition. And in a lot of cases, that's not really necessary. For the majority of paddlers, you can find somebody that goes equally as fast as you locally. And so you have iron sharpening iron, right? If you're able to race against somebody on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and they are very close to your skill level, right? It allows you to make these assessments and progress forward. And again, speaking on behalf of the Florida area, right? If you live somewhere where you're the only paddler for 150 miles, you might not have this luxury, and you do have to go seek out these larger events. But for us here in Florida, like if you want to race, there's a race every week or every 2 weeks. So on the other side of it, we have international level events, right? World championship events. And the thing that is linked with that is a governing body, right? You have to have an organization that sets up all of the infrastructure that goes into the progression and the structure of these world level events. You have a plethora of rules and there's all kinds of different things going on. So what's new in the news would be that stand-up paddleboard through the International Canoe Federation is still going through some of the learning curve on how to structure the event. What are the distances? What is the equipment we're going to use? What are the actual rules that we're trying to run with? There's so many things that they're trying to iron out. It's fun looking at it because there are other paddle disciplines that have been around longer who have gone through these same exact things that SUP is going through currently. Many people in the SUP world don't travel into other paddle disciplines or don't care or don't look into the history, so they don't realize that they're just kind of repeating a process that has already happened 3 or 4 different times for canoe, kayak, and dragon boat. I wanted to draw some of the comparisons and some of the complaints that come from SUP, and it's like a universal complaint between all of the sports, and one of the reasons that they fall into a specific answer, and you have a winner and a loser from these answers. So one of the first ones with SUP is the introduction of a very specific board specification. As SUP is currently held, you can use a 14-foot board is the spec, right? It cannot be any longer, and I don't know if it can be shorter either. So I think it has to be 14 feet in length. And so this is like a manufacturing production standard, right? If you get a race board, it's gonna be 14 feet. But within that, you can change the width and the volume of it, right? So the more volume, the larger of a paddler can stand on it with buoyancy, right? So if you're 90 pounds, you don't need as much volume as somebody that is 300 pounds. The spec that they're trying to introduce, I believe it's only for juniors, is 14 feet long by 25 inches, and it may have a capped out volume as well. So what this means is you have a very specific thing that you have to use in order to compete. Before, you have some leeway. If I'm smaller, I can use something narrower. If I'm larger, I can use something wider. There's a lot of customization that you can put into the craft to morph to you. Now, bear in mind, it has to be 14 feet long. So there is one spec. A true open customization would be any length, any width, and you could change all of these parameters to fit you perfectly. But you have 14 foot, now the width is what they're trying to monitor and keep a specific width. And so what's the problem with this, right? When you have a specific specification for equipment, you now open the door where the athlete has to be very specifically shaped, size, and length to properly propel it at the highest level. And this is a reality, right? Like when we look at the Olympics, when you look at different sports, across the board, most of the athletes are going to look pretty similar. There are some athletes in some sports that are going to be up and down in their height and leg length and arm length and torso length and so on. But for the most part, there's a lot of optimization that comes in with the more equipment that you start to factor in. Another example I spoke about recently with a friend is the Olympic high hurdles. All of the Olympic finalists for the last dozens of cycles have an inseam of 42 to 44 inches. Why would they have an inseam that high? Because the Olympic high hurdle is exactly 43 centimeters tall. So if your inseam in your leg is as tall as that, you only have to do the splits and hover over it, right? If you have a 33-inch inseam, it means that you have to jump up 10 inches, clear it, and then descend 10 inches before you hit the ground again. So making these arcs over the top of the hurdles takes too long comparatively to an athlete that is just gliding and hovering over them. And so this is a great example. If those high hurdles were only 30 inches tall, it would change the dynamic of everything by quite a bit. And there's millions of examples of this, right? And so this is one of the inherent bad parts about too many specifications within a sport, is you now box out people based on size and their leverages and so on. We want inclusivity, right? Like, that's one of the big things that lets people join into a sport and to feel the numbers that a governing body and a community need. But on the flip side, specification is simplicity, right? You have one spec, it's easy to acquire, and it allows people the accessibility to get into it. And from a governing body standpoint, there is also money to be made, right? If there is a specific board spec, now you can pay a manufacturer specifically to make you these products. So whoever gets the bid or the one that gets to make these mass-produced boards for the governing body, there's a lot of money to be made in that relationship, and there's probably a kickback to the organizer or whatever, right? But again, there's money at stake with this implication added in. So all of that sounds crazy, but Dboat has already done that, right? They use very specific boats. They are a very specific weight, length, and width. So everything about that has already been done, right? They've already decided on a spec both for the paddles as well as for the vessel that you're in, and then they contract one manufacturer to make all of these each cycle. Dboat gets away with it more because there's so many elements that you have to add in, right? Having 20 humans in a boat, it's very difficult to figure out what is the exact weight range and what is the exact limb leverages that is most ideal and the weight distribution in the boat. It is just a huge physics and math problem that you really can't solve. So you have some leeway in moving some of these metrics around. One vessel, one person, and a sprint distance, you can narrow down a lot of things very quickly. And that goes back to the ICF for canoe and kayak in the Olympics. They have a very specific spec model for the kayaks, which can come in different sizes. So they account for the volume difference, but the length and the width is capped out. If you've ever seen an ICF sprint kayak, it is an incredibly narrow and small, flat water looking vessel, right? It is like a little needle. But bear in mind, the Olympic champion from this last Olympics is 6'8" in the 1,000 meter. That is a huge human sitting in a very tiny boat. Proportionality wise, if you are 6'8", you have a ton of weight and leverages to propel a 17-foot craft through the water easy. Proportionality wise, if you were to take somebody that's only 5'5" and half of their body weight, that boat is essentially going to feel 40 or 50% larger in comparison. But if you were to make the spec a 9-foot craft, right? Now the person that is incredibly small, they're the only ones that can man and operate this vessel. The person 6'8" physically cannot get into the thing. They can't float in it, and so they can't perform with it, so they can't win with it. That's another example of the athlete mirroring the vessel that they're in, right? If they had made those crafts half the length, then the people that would be in them would be like little jockeys. So there's not really a right answer for it, but both of the organizing bodies have decided on a spec in the past, and it is something that they always want to do, right? So SUP in the next 10 years through the International Canoe Federation will likely have a spec model that is 14 feet, and if they do have the S and M and L and XL sizing for the boards, that may account for a ½ inch or an inch difference or a volume change within a spec that is capped out in its width. But again, it's already been done time and time again. can. And like I said, I feel like it's just a matter of time before it becomes a reality. SUP is likely leaning towards being more inclusive, so that width number is likely going to be larger. Juniors being on a 14 by 25 is a huge board if you're very small, and I think they want to reflect that with the adults in the future. Thank you guys so much for checking this out. If there's any other topics that you would like to see discussed here, feel free to reach out anytime. Thank you again, and we'll see you all next week for the next K2N vlog episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to Lake Hernando. So the red circle is the buoy that you see on the right there, and that is the start line. We line up kind of arbitrarily around this mark, and then we are aiming diagonally across the lake. So this course is real interesting because it takes us off of Lake Hernando. We're only on the lake for about 2 miles total, and you spend, if you do the long course, 9 miles in these back canals that connects Lake Hernando to the lake in Inverness. So you can actually go to the next town over following this. So we're aiming for the point where the trees end, right? So you can see this little gap here. There's a little canal, and it's shorter if you go through here. If you don't, you can see above my red arrows that the big part of the lake there still kind of turns and goes through, and you can go out there and it's not much longer. But if you're trying to run the course as efficiently as possible, you want to make it into this little canal. You know you've done it properly if those trees are right on the right side of you. Water's plenty deep, no weeds, easy to go through. So on this course, there's also another shortcut coming up here. You can see the white arrow brings you into the main channel where the boats are, just a little bit to the left of the video here. And I'm on the red arrow line going through, and you can see in front of me, it gets incredibly narrow. Again, deep water, well, it's not super deep, but your rudder wouldn't hit. Outriggers fit through here as well, and it's kind of a tight fit, and it just allows you to take a very straight line from the last angle into this angle. So this is just a little bit of a shortcut. If you go further to the outside, it doesn't ruin your race. You're only gonna paddle, you know, another 50 meters or something like that. So the Blueberry Slide, it's a very interesting name. The reason that it's called that is the short course goes to what is called Blueberry Hill. It's kind of a, you know, in Florida, everything's flat. And so we have only a few elevated areas. And so the hill really stands out. And then the long course goes all the way to what's called an airboat slide. So an airboat slide, airboats don't have like props or anything that are under them, and they act as like a hover machine. And so they can power up and go over the slide, but a traditional powerboat can't make it through, right? And this slide is like attached to a dam, essentially. And this allows you to go from lake to lake and town to town as well, right? So because we have the short course turn is Blueberry Hill and the long course is the airboat slide, we put those two terms together to make Blueberry Slide, which is like a lot of things at Lake Hernando where it has a funny nickname that nobody gets until you know the backstory. So this is all just progressing down through the same canals that are highlighted in red here. This course, for the most part, is not incredibly tricky. There are some that are much more logistically a nightmare. You can see on the map it looks confusing, but for the most part, as long as you're in the main channel like the video is showing here, you always want to be in the biggest part, right? All of the little canals that you see on Google Maps, they get narrower, right? So if you're paddling off course, you are in a very tight quadrant, and usually that's an alert that like, hey, you went off course. So as we're going through here, the most important turn that can occur is going to be on the next video clip, and it's at the tip of the red arrow that you see currently, the last one. And this is an intersection right at 2 miles, right? So you make it to the 2 mile mark and you make this left-hand turn. On your way back, right, if you're doing the short course, it's about mile 4.4, 4.2. And for the long course, it's about mile 9, 9.1 on the way back. And you have to make these turns properly. If you continue in the wrong direction here, it means that you're gonna go to another lake that is adjacent to Lake Hernando, but it does not connect, right? So you're able to go off course for a very long time. And so it's very important on this course to remember those mile marks, right? When you get to mile 2, make the left-hand turn. It's a real big intersection, but it's easy to get tunnel vision and continue what you perceive as straight, and you have to make an actual turn there. On the way back, it's a 50-50 unless you remember your mile mark and to turn right, right? So if you're able to retrace your steps, right, then it's not a big deal. We've had paddlers make that wrong turn and they end up off course for a very long time. So this is the intersection I'm talking about. So you can see straight looks like an ideal direction, but the left here where it opens up, this is where you want to go. So if you continue on that white arrow, it will take you way off course. There are ribbons that are marked off that are easy to see. With the GoPro being such a wide shot, it's very hard to zoom in and see them on the camera, but there are a ton of ribbons on the left side there. And you can see if you follow the white arrow, you end up in the middle of nowhere, right? So we want to stay in this canal system for the majority of the race. So it's real important. That is the most important intersection. Anything else, if you do go off course, right, it dead ends almost immediately. So it's not really a big deal. You just kind of turn around and go right back. So following the canal down this way, it ends up looking like a river, right? So from Lake Hernando to this is quite a shock. And it's interesting that the bodies of water are all connected. The red circle is Blueberry Hill, right? So you just continue down the main channel here. It's nice and deep. There's no weeds. There's minimal things to worry about. You just kind of run the canal in the middle and progress your way down. Like I said, it's not a river, so you don't have to hug the sides or worry about current or anything. It's just kind of shaped like a river. So as you make your way through, Blueberry Hill is the red circle there. This would be the turnaround point for the short course racers, right? So you can see that elevation there. Once we get around this part of the island, you'll see more of it. There are blue ribbons on the left-hand side here as well. And then we have ribbons that are on these yellow poles. So these yellow poles here, you would want to get next to them with your paddlecraft and make a 180 turn and make your way back. If you're doing the long course, which I'm scoping out today, you just continue down and just stay in the big part of the channel and keep going through. So it's a very easy turnaround. If you miss it, then you're signed up for the long course, and you really have to have your head down and not pay attention to not notice the giant island on the left side. The mile mark for that is about 3.2 miles one way, and then 6.4 for the short course. And then you just keep going, right? So it's another 2.5 miles approximately as you're going through, or 2 miles approximately, and you just keep staying in the channel here. There's a bunch of trees. It's fairly scenic for the most part. Like I said, it's a very change of waterways comparatively to the wide open lake. Paddling out here in traffic is fun because there is a limited amount of space if you have a big draft pack, but again, no current to contend with. So now we're getting really close to the airboat slide. The white circle is this house that's on the right-hand side here, and you just keep continuing through. We have a bunch of ribbons that are marked off here on the left side, and this is to help you find your way out of these canals as you make your way back. So as we're going through, there's a house on the right, and you continue straight. And once we get to the next intersection, when you look right, you will see the airboat slide, right? And what you would do is you would paddle all the way down to the airboat slide. And right when you get there, you'll see us very small canals on the left-hand side. So as we're going through, the airboat slide is on the right there, and it's attached to this dam. You can see the road is there. It's Turner Camp Road. And coming through, there's a very narrow little opening here to go through. There's no obstructions. There's some weeds and stuff, but they're not the kind that would get caught on your rudder. So when you go through here, you definitely want to be single file because it doesn't fit very well with 2 or 3 boats wide, right? So once you see the dam, you want to start trying to single file your way through here. You can hit this full speed. I wanted to go slow just to show, you know, this little area here. And then as we're going around, you want to loop around this island, right? So there's an intersection at the top of the second arrow, and you can turn right there and it'll take you the wrong way. You want to continue left, right? So you see the dam, take a left, take a left, take a left, and you're making a big circle around this little grass patch. This will put you back on the course that you were just on, going in the opposite direction. You can make it all the way back to the lake. So this is going through. You can see the 2 white arrows would be the wrong intersection. So this would be one incorrect intersection of turning too early. This is why we have ribbons across the way here to make sure that you get back onto the path that you were just on. If I turned my head really hard to the left, you would see the dam, right? So this is that same waterway approaching. The big house is on the left-hand side again. And then the final thing that you want to make sure of is that you make this right-hand turn on the side. We have a bunch of ribbons there. This year, if you continue straight, there's a bunch of weeds, which kind of bars you from going in that direction, but it's easy to go straight here and then go around this house on the left here, right? So you want to stay in the big part of the channel, and as you approach, you want to make this right-hand turn, just kind of hug and follow those ribbons. From there, it's very simple. Just stay in this channel all the way back at mile 9.2. make a right-hand turn, and then just keep following the waterways and you'll be back on Lake Hernando, and it's easy to see the parking lot and make your way back to the start line. My GoPro died on the way, so I don't have footage on the way back. But this is the course as we go all the way through. Like I said, there's a lot of opportunities to turn and potentially go the wrong way, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to follow the racers in front of you, and it is very clearly marked. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you guys for checking out the video.